Hello and welcome to The World This Week. I'm Girish Sawlani. Coming up, World Health Authorities scramble to track and contain the new coronavirus as the Chinese city it emerged from is placed in lockdown. A wrangling over the rules as President Donald Trump's impeachment trial formally gets underway in the Senate. And the comedy world loses one of its greats. Terry Jones, a founding member of Monty Python, dies after a battle with dementia. The spread of the new coronavirus has dominated international headlines this week as the number of infections and deaths from the outbreak continue to rise. The world remains on alert while the origin of the deadly virus has been tracked back to the Chinese city of Wuhan. China correspondent Bill Birtles and cameraman Brand Cumming flew into the city and were able to just make it out again before authorities enforced a travel ban.
The government's bombshell in the early hours of the morning presented people with an impossible choice. Stay in the city for who knows how long in the midst of an escalating epidemic, or try to get out quick smart. As you can imagine, many people made a beeline for Wuhan's airport and train station, but others opted to bunker down to be with their families. These passengers are travelling where others would prefer not, desperate to spend time with family on the Lunar New Year. We joined a plane load of travellers into the coronavirus epicentre, Wuhan, a city of 11 million people. But within hours, the situation here had dramatically changed. A government announcement at 2 a.m. abruptly declared anyone who wanted to leave had just 8 hours to get out.
Why should I worry? The virus is already here. I'm not concerned.
I can still leave, but now I've changed my mind. I've decided it's better to stay here with family.
While some people here appear relaxed, most are taking this very seriously. It's rare to see anybody here not wearing a mask, and those able to escape in the nick of time say they feel very lucky. For some, the snap decision scuttled long-planned holidays.
What can you say? The government's measures are okay. We have to consider the greater good.
Under pressure to avoid a global epidemic, China's government ordered all public transport to stop at 10 a.m. The potential for this virus to spread during the holiday period is mammoth. Mainlanders are expected to make 7 million trips abroad this week and hundreds of millions within the country. They now make 150 million more trips out of China each year than when the SARS virus spread in 2003.
We stress to them that by having a strong action, not only they will control the outbreak in their country, but they will also minimize the chances of this outbreak spreading internationally.
For those who manage to leave Wuhan in time, screening and health checks await wherever they go. A city under quarantine with no idea how long it'll be cut off from the world. Bill Birtles, ABC News, Shanghai.
Now to the spread of African swine fever, which has already killed a quarter of the world's pigs. The disease is causing particular fear in Papua New Guinea. Authorities there are doing what they can to prepare, but they're faced with a funding shortfall. PNG correspondent Natalie Whiting reports.
In Papua New Guinea, pigs are incredibly important, culturally, socially and economically. They're regularly exchanged to settle conflicts between tribes or when a marriage is agreed to. Major events are marked with the killing or gifting of a pig. It happens in both traditional and modern situations, like this celebration for a soccer team that won their grand final. 2 pigs are on the menu.
The animal pig itself, it has a very high value in all societies of Papua New Guinea, all societies. We normally have feasts. We always kill a pig.
That's why officials here are so worried about African swine fever. It's already killed millions of pigs in affected countries and it's spreading, moving closer to PNG.
The mortality can be very high, even up to 100%. And considering that impact, and considering PNG's close cultural association with pig, that's a very significant disaster if it happens in PNG.
An international team from the UN's Food and Agriculture Organisation has visited to help with preparation and awareness. A team from Australia has also been helping. But authorities say an extra 18 million kina, or almost $8 million, is needed for detection and response programs. With such a high likelihood of the disease now reaching Papua New Guinea, preparation is going to be vital.
Well, all eyes were on the US Senate this week as Donald Trump's impeachment trial formally gets underway. It's just the third time in history a US president has been impeached, and the charges center around allegations Mr. Trump pressured Ukraine's president to investigate political rival Joe Biden and his son Hunter. But it started with a marathon session where 100 senators wrangled over the rules. They had all took an oath to be impartial, but Democrats and Republicans voted along party lines to block new witnesses and evidence for now. Here's North America correspondent David Lipson.
Almost 4 months to the day since Democrats invoked impeachment, the trial of Donald John Trump is finally underway.
The Senate will convene as a court of impeachment.
100 senators are now acting as jurors.
All persons are commanded to keep silent on pain of imprisonment.
Their role now is to listen and decide whether to remove President Trump from office for pressuring Ukraine to investigate his political rival, Joe Biden, then impeding the subsequent inquiry.
The charges here involve the sacrifice of our national security at home and abroad, and a threat to the integrity of the next election.
When you look at these articles of impeachment, they're not only ridiculous, they are dangerous to our republic.
Even the trial rules are bitterly contested. The Republicans wanted to stop last month's impeachment evidence from being automatically admitted and for hearings to run into the early hours of the morning.
The McConnell resolution will result in a rush trial with little evidence in the dark of night. Literally, the dark of night.
But when the rules were laid out, they'd been amended to more closely resemble Bill Clinton's trial 21 years ago. The fact the proposed rules changed in the space of 24 hours is a sign that moderate Republicans are taking this trial seriously. The big question is whether they'll allow new evidence in the form of witnesses and documents.
It was a hoax. It goes nowhere because nothing happened.
Removing Donald Trump from office remains inconceivable. The Democrats' best hope is to wound him before the election. David Lipson, ABC News, Washington.
But while Donald Trump's alleged actions were on trial in Washington, the man himself was attending the annual World Economic Forum in Davos. He delivered a message of optimism, which was in stark contrast to activist Greta Thunberg, who admonished world leaders for failing to act on climate change. Here's Europe correspondent Bridget Brennan.
In the age of anxiety over climate change, the World Economic Forum this year is as much about the environment as the economy. The star speaker was Greta Thunberg, the 17-year-old Swedish activist who's inspired a movement.
Well, I'm here to tell you that, unlike you, my generation will not give up without a fight. The facts are clear, but they are still too uncomfortable for you to address.
Referencing the catastrophic bushfires in Australia, she blasted world leaders and told them to stop investing in fossil fuels.
Our house is still on fire. Your inaction is fueling the flames by the hour.
A long way from his troubles at home, Donald Trump used his speech at the forum to rebuke climate activists.
This is a time for tremendous hope and joy and optimism and action. But to embrace the possibilities of tomorrow, we must reject the perennial prophets of doom and their predictions of the apocalypse.
Australia's representative at Davos, the Finance Minister Matthias Cormann, backed Mr Trump's call for optimism.
I was in the audience. I thought it was a great speech. It was a fantastic speech.
Outside, protesters, some dressed as koalas, called for climate justice.
these koalas climb to Davos to get answers for why are they still investing in Adani? Why are these things happening? How is it you can, with a straight face, continue to destroy the planet?
100 companies are responsible for 71% of global emissions since 1988, and many of them are members of the WEF.
50 years since it began, the World Economic Forum says it's now asking multi-billion-dollar corporations to put planet alongside profit. Bridget Brennan, ABC News.
Lebanon's new government has been met with rioting and violence. The incoming Prime Minister promised to rescue the country from economic disaster, but protesters say he is part of the problem. Here's Middle East correspondent Adam Harvey.
Lebanon's new government has been in power for just one day, but people on the streets have already delivered their verdict. Protesters in downtown Beirut might be throwing stones at police, but their real targets are the leaders who've driven the nation's economy off a cliff.
They push us to this point. We never want the violence.
10 weeks after Saad Hariri quit as Prime Minister, his replacement has finally won enough support from Lebanon's political factions to form a new cabinet.
This is the first time Lebanon's had such a government in its history. It's a rescue team whose only role is to work hard and give all it has.
The cabinet has the backing of Lebanon's powerful Hezbollah militia, an essential requirement for any government here. But protesters say it's just a new facade for the same old political players. After 3 months of family-friendly, peaceful protests, these latest riots are angrier and there are more casualties every night.
We've been on the road for nearly 3 months now, 95 days, and nothing happened. They're still the same. They don't want to listen.
Lebanon might have a new government, but it's not making things any better. In fact, the situation is getting worse every night, much more violent. There's a real feeling that Lebanon is slipping into chaos.
Billions of dollars in international aid and loans has been pledged to Lebanon, but the cash won't be released until the new government tackles the corruption and financial mismanagement that brought the nation to its knees. The protesters have the same demands, just a more forceful way of delivering them. Adam Harvey, ABC News, Beirut.
Well, China is being blamed for causing havoc with water levels in the upper reaches of the Mekong River system. Communities in northern Thailand say dams being built upstream for huge hydropower projects is changing the natural cycle of the Mekong. Southeast Asia correspondent Amy Bainbridge reports from Chiang Khong in northern Thailand.
Chadden Chamblim has been driving boats on the Mekong River since he was a boy.
The water level is far too low. It should be at this level in January. I'm concerned because a lot of the fish are gone.
Fishermen agree the dams are changing the river.
I used to get enough fish to feed the whole family and to pay expenses, but now there's just not enough.
China's Jinghong Dam is generating hydropower 300 kilometres upstream from here. Earlier this month, testing at the dam reduced river flows, causing water levels to plummet by up to a metre. It left locals here struggling, like Britanna Yongyuan, who collects riverweed to feed her family and sell at the local market.
If the water is fluctuating, I can't collect the riverweed. If it's too low, I can't take it because it's on the shore like this. I need 5 kilograms, but today I got nothing.
There should be negotiation and dialogue with counterpart in upstream area how to manage the water resource in the Mekong River properly.
Last year, China said its dams were helping regulate flows during the wet and dry seasons and mitigating the impact of climate change. China has already built 11 dams further upstream from here on the Mekong River system, and there are concerns with more dams to be built further north and further south that there will be further environmental consequences for this part of the world. The Mekong River Commission, an intergovernmental agency based in Laos, says it's working with China to monitor the impact of the dams, and it's pleased China has begun notifying downstream countries when flows will be disrupted. Communities want their message heard upstream, that their livelihoods are being affected. Amy Bainbridge, ABC News, Chiang Khong.
Well, amber is fossilized tree resin that now drives a multi-billion-dollar global market. The gemstone is used in jewelry and even teething necklaces for babies. But much of the world's amber is mined illegally in Eastern Europe, controlled by cartels so powerful that even local police are afraid to intervene. Linton Besser headed to northern Ukraine for this story, produced in collaboration with the ABC's foreign correspondent.
In rural Ukraine, a protest by local villagers turns hostile when police open fire.
People decided to talk to police themselves. When people were about 50 metres from them, the police started shooting.
It's March 2016 and the locals in dirt-poor Klesiv are not backing down.
We are so poor in Ukraine despite having such rich natural resources. We're like beggars with hat in hand. But we are not poor, we're being robbed.
This is at the heart of the battle. 40,000-year-old tree resin that once processed becomes amber, a coveted gemstone with a massive global market. This former Soviet state holds the world's second largest deposit of raw amber. It's largely being mined by hand. By flooding these holes with water, the amber simply floats to the top. For the young and the old, digging for amber can lift them out of poverty. When prices are good, they can earn as much as $1,000 per month, 5 times the salary of a supermarket worker. But this is dangerous business, not because of the hard physical labour, but because the government of Ukraine has criminalised the industry.
They do not legalise it because if they did, then the money wouldn't go into their pockets.
It means these locals can only mine safely if they agree to work for criminal cartels and hand over half of all the amber they find.
If they have another option, like working legally for the state, I'm pretty sure that 99% of them would do that instead of working for those gangs.
Those who refuse to pay the gangs and the cops face brutal crackdowns by the authorities. Alexander Vasilyev knows only too well the price of defiance. After calling out the criminal bosses who were controlling the industry, a grenade was thrown into his bedroom window.
They threw the grenade from this spot into the open window. After the explosion, 3 windows blew out. Thank God no one died. When they did it, my wife and I were in the room and it was a miracle that we survived. All the debris stuck in the headboard. The headboard saved us.
While it was the cartels who attacked Alexander, the systematic corruption which protects them has led to another major problem for Ukraine. The almost total devastation of the natural environment. This used to be an area of tremendously old pine forest, but it's been completely destroyed. The Ukrainian government says that since the black market in amber took off, more than 2.6 thousand hectares of land has been devastated. The locals tell us the true figure is far, far higher. It just feels like I'm walking on the moon. The appetite for amber is so voracious, even residential areas have been pillaged. How close are we to your house from here?
About 100 metres, maybe 50. The amber is everywhere around us.
Estimates put the value of Ukraine's illegal amber industry at $500 million US. And it's here in the capital Kiev where much of that money flows. The question is, to whom?
It never can happen without the influence of high-level authorities. So that's why this is a main task for law enforcement of all types of law enforcement in Ukraine to get evidence for that.
Detective Olena Krolovetskaya is one of the few who have tried to trace the money. 2 years ago, the National Anti-Corruption Bureau she works for put an undercover agent into the field. They were targeting this man, Borislav Rosenblatt, an influential member of parliament.
Мы, получается, грубо говоря, платим там $150 тысяч, да?
Ну, 150 это я так поставлю, что мы не лезем. Это будет 20. Я только там куплю пару голосов.
Olena's team charged 7 people with corruption offences, but 2 years later, the court case has barely begun. In this notoriously corrupt country, a just outcome cannot be guaranteed.
All of our detectives want to live in a country that will be fair, uncorrupted, and to respect all these human rights.
We have corruption at the highest level. There is no higher. They are getting so much money that they don't have the time to count the banknotes. They have to weigh them. I'm saying that everything is as wrong as it could be. We reached the bottom. We're at the bottom now.
Well, thousands of armed gun rights activists have rallied peacefully in the U.S. state of Virginia to protest against new gun control laws. There were fears that white supremacists would use the rally to stoke unrest, but it was calm and counter-protesters stayed away.
Once the Confederate capital, Richmond, came under siege once more. This time it was lawfully armed civilians taking over the streets.
We are patriots here as a unified front to say that we will not be stepped on.
The governor imposed a state of emergency, concerned that armed militia groups could try to storm the legislature.
I think it's a joke. I think his state of emergency is the biggest block party ever in Richmond, is what it's turned out to be. The only thing we're missing are taco trucks.
The FBI last week arrested 3 alleged neo-Nazis, fearing a repeat of the deadly violence by white nationalists in Charlottesville in 2017. But there was no sign of that here.
It's not a white thing, it's not a black thing, it's a liberty thing. We want our freedoms, we want to keep our freedoms, and we don't want the government telling us what and what we can't have.
This show of iron force was triggered by proposed changes to Virginia's gun laws, with plans to impose background checks and restrict purchases to 1 handgun per month.
There is a huge pent-up demand for reasonable firearms legislation.
A spate of recent shootings in Virginia ignited a grassroots movement against the state's lax gun laws.
We heard the screaming, we heard the gunshots, and that day changed my life forever. And so since then, this has been my cause. I'm going to fight for the rest of my life.
Democrats were swept to power last November in both state houses. Now their mandate to tighten gun laws is being severely tested.
The fact that armed militias have shown up in our capital demonstrates even more the need to ensure we have effective gun violence prevention legislation.
In anticipation of the laws being passed, dozens of municipalities have declared themselves Second Amendment sanctuaries, which means they won't enforce these laws. In short, it's a standoff between those who make the laws at a state level and those who enforce them at a local level.
There are tens of thousands of people here with guns showing them that we don't want them to become tyrannical, and if they do, then we're going to have a real problem.
The president has voiced his support for the demonstration, hoping it's a rallying cry for re-election in November. David Lipson, ABC News, Richmond, Virginia.
Well, Terry Jones, a founding member of the legendary Monty Python comedy team, has died 4 years after being diagnosed with a rare form of dementia. The 77-year-old comedian, actor and director was behind some of the group's most memorable work.
How would you like it, sir? The 1960s was a time of radical social upheaval. But when Monty Python's Flying Circus first aired in 1969, it was like nothing else before it. The competition in the comedy troupe was fierce, but Terry Jones came up with some of the funniest sketches, influencing language and culture.
Egg, bacon and spam! Egg, bacon, sausage and spam!
It's like one of those moments when you just sort of write something and, is this funny?
Terry Jones was born in Wales in 1942, but grew up in England. He first teamed up with fellow student Michael Palin at Oxford University. The pair came up with many Python classics.
Charlie, you come to this mark there.
The troupe then embarked on a series of films, and Terry Jones got a chance to direct as well as act.
Now you listen here. He's not the Messiah. He's a very naughty boy. Now go away.
He was soon in the firing line as religious conservatives took offence at Life of Brian.
Oh, my foot. Oh, oh, damn.
Life of Brian isn't blasphemous because it doesn't touch on belief at all. It's heretical because it touches on dogma.
Jones and Palin were also behind the Ripping Yarns series. But in recent years, dementia took its toll on a brilliant mind.
Button down.
Despite the on-screen madness, his comedy was grounded in ordinary life. And that's what his closest collaborator will miss the most.
Oh, I shall miss the sociable Terry, Sorry. I just miss putting my arm around him and having a drink.
The countless comedians inspired by Terry Jones are remembering a genius who helped change the face of world comedy.
And you can head to the ABC's World News page for all the international headlines. And remember, The World is on every weeknight on the ABC News channel. I'm Girish Sawlani. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.